She was standing in the backyard when I walked through the gate, not waiting for me, not even knowing I was coming, just there, moving between the chairs and the table like she owned the air around her, which I suppose she did. It was her yard, her house, her life I was walking into without fully understanding what that would cost me. I remember the light that afternoon, the way it caught the side of her face when she turned around. She looked at me the way people look at someone they've been expecting. Calm, certain, like she'd already decided something about me before I'd opened my mouth. "You must be Marcus." Not a question. I said, "Yes, ma'am," and she smiled at that. A real smile, the kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches anywhere else, and handed me a glass of lemonade I hadn't asked for. "Danny's inside, but drink that first. Look like you walked here in the heat." I had. 20 minutes. I hadn't told anyone that. I stood in that backyard drinking lemonade and watching her straighten chairs that were already straight, and I felt something I didn't have a word for yet. Not attraction. Not then. Something quieter than that. Like walking into a room and realizing, without anyone telling you, that this is where you were supposed to end up. I was 17 years old. I didn't know yet that the feeling would still be with me 6 years later, standing in this same yard, understanding for the first time exactly what it meant.
6 years of Saturday mornings in that kitchen. 6 years of coffee and conversation, and the particular way she laughed at things. Not politely, not for the room, but genuinely. Like something had caught her off guard and she didn't mind. I knew every corner of that kitchen. The cabinet that stuck, the mug she always reached for first, the way the morning light came through the window at an angle that turned everything gold for exactly 20 minutes before moving on. I knew all of it. What I didn't know, what I hadn't let myself know, was when I stopped seeing her as Danny's mom and started seeing her as her. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. She was talking about a book she'd been trying to finish for weeks, and I was nodding like I was listening. And then I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching her hands around the coffee mug, both palms, the way she held it like she was keeping something warm inside it. Her thumb tracing the rim, slow, absent, the way you touch something without thinking about it. She was completely at ease, and I was sitting across from her realizing that something, quietly and without asking my permission, had changed. I looked away. I picked up my own coffee. I told myself it was nothing. But I thought about her hands on the drive home. And I knew, even then, even trying not to, that nothing was exactly the wrong word for it.
The first time we were truly alone together, there was no reason for it. Danny had moved to Austin 2 months earlier. Good job, great city, exactly where he was supposed to be. I was happy for him. I told myself I was also fine with the fact that I no longer had a reason to be at that house. Then Carol called. She'd found a box of Danny's old things in the garage. Baseball cards, a jersey, a textbook he'd probably want. Was I passing by his storage unit any time? I wasn't. I drove 40 minutes out of my way to pick it up. We ended up at a small cafe on Birchwood. Her suggestion. Just coffee, just an hour. I said sure, like it was nothing. But here is what I hadn't understood about being alone with her when it was just us, without Danny filling the spaces, without the dog and the television and the ordinary noise of a family home. Something came into focus that I'd been successfully blurring for years. She listened differently than anyone I knew. Fully. Like what you were saying was the only thing happening in the world. And she laughed at something I said. Genuinely. Unexpectedly. And I thought, I would drive 40 minutes out of my way for this every single day.
That thought scared me. Not because it was wrong exactly, because of how completely right it felt. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, she touched my arm for just a second. Don't be a stranger, Marcus. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could make myself drive away.
There are moments that don't announce themselves. No music, no warning, just an ordinary Sunday afternoon. And then something that divides time into before and after. I'd come over to fix some shelves Danny had promised to sort before he left and never did. It took an hour. She had music playing somewhere in the house, something old and slow that drifted through the rooms. After the shelves, we were in the kitchen. She was making sandwiches. We were talking. A movie, a restaurant, nothing that mattered. And she reached across the counter for the pepper at the exact same moment I did. We both stopped. Her hand, my hand. 1 inch of space between them that felt like the most significant inch in the world. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Long enough. Long enough that it couldn't be called an accident. Long enough that pretending it hadn't happened was going to require something from both of us. She looked at me. I looked at her. The music. Danny came home for a weekend in August, and I understood, for the first time, what relief felt like when it was also complicated. Seeing him was easy, the way it always was. Same laugh, same jokes, same person I'd known since we were 12 years old. The three of us fell back into our old rhythm without trying. Burgers on the grill, a movie no one really watched, Danny talking about Austin, about a girl he swore was nothing serious, in the tone of someone who was already planning a future. Carol laughed at all the right moments, refilled the chips without being asked the exact right questions. I watched her do all of this and felt something complicated settle in my chest. Here she was, in her element, in her home, Danny's mom. And everything that had been building quietly in my head suddenly felt very far away and very foolish. Then Danny stepped outside for a work call, and we were alone in the living room with 2 mugs of tea and the particular quiet that falls when a third person leaves a room. We talked, easy, warm, the way we always did, about nothing important. When the front door opened and Danny came back in, still on his phone, I looked up. And she looked up. And in the single second before Danny was fully through the door, I saw something in her expression. Relief, maybe? That he was back? Or something more complicated than relief? I looked away before I could decide which one. I stopped going to the house. Not a decision, not a conversation, just the visits thinned out, then stopped. 2 weeks, then a month. I told myself I was busy. I told myself a lot of things that were technically true and fundamentally not the point. The point was that I had finally, clearly, without anywhere left to hide from it, understood what I was feeling. And once you understand something like that, once you stop calling it nothing and see it for what it actually is, you can't sit in someone's kitchen pretending your chest isn't doing what it's doing every time she refills your coffee. So I stayed away. I called Danny more. Asked about Carol in passing, the way you ask about someone's parents. Warmly, from the right kind of distance. She mentioned she hadn't seen you in a while, he said one evening. Work's been busy. She said to tell you hi. Tell her hi back. I hung up and sat at my apartment window and looked at the city for a long time. I thought about what I was. 23 years old. My best friend's mom.
A feeling I had no right to act on and apparently no ability to put down. A feeling isn't a fact. Wanting something and having it are completely different territories. The border between them is something decent people don't cross. I knew all of this. I sat at that window anyway, in the dark, thinking about a woman who held her coffee mug like she was keeping something warm inside it.
I came back in October because Danny called and said, "Don't you dare skip her birthday." And I said, "Of course not," like I hadn't been avoiding that house for 2 months. It was a good evening. Neighbors, a few of her friends, her sister who'd driven in from out of state. Carol moved through all of it the way she moved through everything. Easy, warm, the whole room slightly better for having her in it. I was leaving around 9. She walked me to the door, hugged me the way she always had. Quick, warm, completely normal. I stepped out ahead of her onto the porch as she stopped to wave goodbye to a neighbor pulling out of the driveway. She followed me out. The second porch step had always been uneven. Danny had almost fixed it twice. She knew about it, but it was dark and she was mid-wave and she misjudged it. She didn't fall, just a sharp shift of weight, a small sound of surprise. I turned and caught her arm without thinking. We stood like that, her hand gripping my forearm, my hand on her upper arm, holding. She looked up at me, startled, half laughing at herself. Something else underneath both of those things that I felt more than saw. "Thank you," she said. "I keep forgetting that step." "I know," I said. "Danny always meant to fix it." She laughed softly.
He really did. But neither of us had moved. My hand was still on her arm, her hand still on mine, close enough that I could see the porch light catching the dark of her eyes. I let go first. "Good night, Carol." "Good night, Marcus." I walked to my car without looking back. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other in my lap, completely aware of exactly where it had been and what it had felt like, and how long I was going to be thinking about it. It was November, cold, a Tuesday with nothing special about it. I don't know why I drove to her house that night. There was no occasion, no excuse I'd prepared. I just found myself in the car, then on her street, then knocking on her door like some part of me had made the decision without consulting the rest. She opened it and looked at me for a moment. "Come in," she said. "I'll put the kettle on." We sat in the kitchen. The house was quiet the way it always was now with Danny gone. She asked how I was. I said, "Fine." She said, "Fine" back. And then neither of us said anything for a while, and the silence was not comfortable the way our silences usually were. The kettle boiled. She made tea, set mine in front of me. "Marcus," she said. "I know," I said. She looked at me. "What do you know?" I looked at the mug. I put it down. "I know that I come here too much and then stay away too long. And I know exactly why both of those things happen. And I know I would never..." I stopped. "I know what this is. I'm not going to do anything with it. I needed you to know that I know." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, steady, the voice of someone holding something very still inside them. "I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you mean," she said, "because you deserve better than that." Something in my chest released slightly, just from being heard. "This past year has been strange for me," she continued. "The house quiet, Danny gone, and you..."
She paused. You have been the best part of a lot of ordinary days. I noticed something changing, and I didn't stop it the way I should have. That's mine to carry, not yours. Carol, let me finish. She held up one hand. Not harsh, just asking for space. I'm not 25, and you are. Danny is your best friend, and I am... She stopped, chose the next words carefully. I am someone who cares about you too much to let this become something that costs you things you can't get back.
The kitchen was very quiet. I'm saying it out loud, she said softly, so neither of us has to carry it alone anymore. I looked at her across the table. This woman who had handed me lemonade when I was 17 and taught me without trying to what it felt like to belong somewhere. Okay, I said. It came out quieter than I expected. She reached across and put her hand over mine. Just for a moment. Warm and brief and full of everything that was never going to be said any other way. Then she sat back. Portugal in the spring, she said. You think Lisbon or Porto? I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Porto, I said. Definitely Porto.
Danny came home for Christmas, and I understood. Sitting on that back porch with him on the second night, beers in hand, the street quiet and dark ahead of us, exactly what had almost happened. Not in an abstract way. Concretely. Clearly. His best friend. His mother. The only house I had ever walked into and felt like I was supposed to be there. I would have burned all of it down. For a feeling. For something that was real and true and completely impossible all at the same time. You good? Danny asked. Not casual. The way people ask when they actually want to know. Yeah, I said. Why? I don't know. He seemed different this year. I looked at my beer. Different how? Just different. He shrugged. More settled, maybe. Like you figured something out. I thought about a kitchen in November. A hand over mine. A conversation that could have destroyed everything. And instead had quietly, carefully put everything back where it belonged. Yeah, I said. Maybe I did. He nodded and didn't ask more, because Danny never pushed. It was one of the things I'd always loved about him. We sat in the comfortable silence of two people who'd known each other long enough to not need to fill it. And I thought, some things you protect by leaving them exactly as they are. Some feelings you honor by never acting on them. Danny clinked his bottle against mine. Good, he said. And it was. Spring came slowly that year. Danny called in March to tell me Carol had booked the trip. 2 weeks in Portugal. Her and her sister, leaving in April. He mentioned it the way you mention good news. Easy. Like it was exactly what it was. A woman living her life, moving forward, opening a door. Porto, I said. Yeah, how'd you know? She mentioned it. I hung up and sat for a while. I had been thinking about her less. Not because the feeling had disappeared. I'd learned by then that feelings like that don't disappear. They just find quieter places to live. Further from the surface. Less likely to ambush you on an ordinary Tuesday. What I thought about instead, when I thought about her at all, was that November night in the kitchen. The way she had told the truth when she could have simply been kind. The way she had said, I'm saying it out loud, so neither of us has to carry it alone. Most people never get that. Never get someone who sees exactly what's happening and names it honestly and handles it with that much care.
I had been given that. It was enough. More than enough.
I went over the morning she was leaving for Porto. No reason I could fully explain, just the sense that some things deserve a real goodbye. Not a text, not silence, but an actual moment between two people who had meant something to each other, and were honest enough to know it. She opened the door already in her coat, bag by the stairs, slightly nervous, slightly thrilled. The specific energy of someone about to go somewhere they've been looking forward to for months. "I thought you might come," she said. "Am I predictable?" "Only in the good ways." We stood on the porch for a few minutes. She talked about the itinerary. Lisbon first, then the train north. Her sister had a restaurant list 3 pages long. I listened the way she had always listened to me, fully, without planning what to say next. When the cab pulled up, she picked up her bag. And then she did something she had never done before. She reached up and placed her hand gently against the side of my face, just for a moment. Warm and quiet, and over almost before it began. "You're gonna be all right, Marcus," she said. "You know that, right?" Something moved through me, slow and complete, like a breath I'd been holding for 2 years, finally finding its way out. "Yeah," I said. "I know." She smiled, walked down the porch steps, carefully, because the second one was still uneven and always would be, and got into the cab without looking back. I watched it until it turned the corner. Then I stood in the April morning, in the clean, cool air, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free. Not empty, not sad, just free. The way you feel when something real has been honored and released, and you can finally turn around and look at where you're going. That summer, I felt like myself for the first time in years. Not the version of myself that was always half elsewhere, half inside a feeling I couldn't put down. Just present. In my own life. Waking up in the morning without the first thought being something I couldn't have. Danny forwarded me a photo from Portugal in April. Carol and her sister at a cafe table somewhere with a wide river behind them. Both of them laughing at something outside the frame. The light warm. The whole image full of someone living a life that fit them. She looked happy. Fully, completely, genuinely happy. I looked at the photo for a long time. And then I typed back, "Tell her it looks incredible." And Danny replied 3 minutes later, "She says she told you so." I smiled at my phone in a way I hadn't smiled in a while. Not at what was lost. At what had been. Real and whole. And handled with more honesty than most people manage in a lifetime. Some stories don't end the way you think they will. And some of them end exactly the way they should. And some people, the ones who hand you lemonade when you're 17 and see you before you've said a word, will stay with you not because of what happened, because of everything they were. That's enough. That has always been enough.